Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Today we will discuss Lesson 13 Exam Review. My name is Dan and my colleague Zach is also here. If you have any questions, feel free to send them in at any time throughout today's webinar, or as you're working through your course, you can reach us via phone, email, chat, text, or even make an appointment with us. And you can go to the academic resources page seen on this slide for a lot of additional resources that will help you throughout the remaining part of your course and program. Again, if you have questions, feel free to send them in at any time. So today we will go over a total of 10 objectives in the Lesson 13 webinar, as you will see on the slide in front of you. We'll go over things such as present tense verbs, bodily pains, pronouns, and even do some commands and take questions, amongst the other items here. The Lesson 13 exam is a 4-part exam. You have multiple choice, you have translation from English to Spanish, giving directions in Spanish to get from one place to another, and there's a listening comprehension section as well, which is multiple choice. So today we're going to begin the webinar by discussing the usage of the present indicative tense. And we'll go over a couple of key verb terms here, starting with the infinitive, which is described or defined as the to form of the verb. An infinitive in Spanish always ends with AR, ER, or IR. And you can see an example there, decir, the verb to say or to tell. The stem, however, is the group of letters that precedes the ending, in this case, using the same example, the DEC, everything but the infinitive ending. And finally, the conjugation is formed when you add a stem with an ending and creates subject-verb agreement or a full verb form. So the verb to say, the infinitive, versus I say or I tell, which are both examples of conjugations. On this slide, we'll talk a little bit more about key verb terms, focusing on person and number of the verb. And the person identifies who is doing the action of the verb. Just like in English, it can be in first, second, or third person. And the number identifies how many subjects are doing the action of the verb. You can have a singular subject or plural subjects. So first person singular, first person plural, etc., etc. As we transition to the next slide, we'll talk briefly about English and Spanish subject pronouns, the things that represent who is doing the action of the verb in either an English or a Spanish sentence. On your left side here, you have your English with the Spanish equivalents to the right. And if you notice, there's a little asterisk there next to vosotros because that's typically used only in Spain. It's not going to be something you'll be required to use in your program with us. And another key difference has to do with you as a subject pronoun. You have two ways to express that in Spanish. And on this chart, you'll see you in Spanish in 3 different persons: second singular, third singular, and third plural. Familiar, addressing someone or identifying someone you know, one person. Formal, third singular, one person you may not know, just showing respect to. Third person plural, a group of people, more than one. As we continue, we'll talk about the translation of the present indicative tense, and there actually are 2 possible translations. The first is very verb dependent, meaning the translation sounds different depending on the verb and looks different depending on the verb. So you can see some examples there. I run, I eat, I sleep. None of them look or sound alike. There's no trend that is followed, which is a little bit different than the second possible translation where there is a trend. Right? You can translate present tense also progressively, where you have a form of the present tense of to be, am, is, are, etc., followed by a gerund. So you notice the trend there in the second possibility. I am running, I am eating, I am sleeping, she is running, etc., etc. As long as you have that combination back to back, you have a possible translation of the present tense. As we move forward now, we'll talk still about the present tense, but how to conjugate a regular verb. And there's a two-step process for that. Now remember, we're trying to get the subject and the verb to agree. So you remove the infinitive ending, the AR, the ER, the IR, determine your verb stem, and then you add one of these sets of endings. The left has your AR verb endings, the right chart has your ER, IR verb endings. You would add those endings to the stem that remains after you've removed the infinitive ending. So your endings there, o, as, a, amos, or an, versus o, ace, a, amos, or emos, and n. AR verbs can't have ER, IR endings, and ER, IR verbs can't have AR endings, at least not in the present tense. As we continue, quick review of the verbs ser and a star. Okay, they both mean to be, but they are used differently depending on the context. Ser is a little bit more permanent, deals with things like characteristics or telling time. Star, a little bit more temporary, deals with ideas, feelings, location, etc. And on the bottom, we just show you a quick review of the present tense forms of both of these verbs. Both are irregular verbs. Both of their conjugations look a little bit unusual, don't really follow the rules we just discussed for regular endings on the previous slide or two. Good conjugation to be mindful of, very commonly used. As we continue, we'll discuss a few verb phrases, including acabar and tener, the two verbs you see on the slide here. Typically, when two verbs follow each other immediately, the first is conjugated, the second remains in the infinitive. And with these two specific verbs, sometimes there may be a connecting word between the two verbs. And as it says on the bottom, those words, those connecting words such as de and que, they don't really have an English equivalent or translation, but they must be included within the Spanish phrases to be grammatically correct in Spanish. So a phrase such as acabar plus de plus an infinitive is used to describe something that just recently happened, like I just finished the book. Maybe you just put it down a few moments ago, or you finished it in the last couple of days. Something within the pretty recent past. And then the verb phrase tener plus que plus an infinitive in the second example describes something that has to be done, like the students have to study. Conjugate the first verb in each of the examples, and the second verb in red stays in the infinitive. The thing that just happened or the thing that has to happen. Those will not conjugate, just the main verbs do. As we move on, we'll transition to discuss bodily pains when you want to state that you have something like a headache or a stomach ache, etc. And there are two main ways to do that in Spanish. The first is using a conjugation of tener to express that you physically have it or possess it. You follow that conjugation with the noun for pain, dolor. Follow that with the word de, and then a body part or parts. Literally, I possess a pain of, or I have a pain of or in my head, my arm, my leg, etc. In this example, I have a stomach ache. Tengo dolor de estómago. If you notice, there's no need for an article right before the noun in this case. Not necessary. In English, we would say, I have a headache, a stomach ache, but the words a or an are not required. Un or una, not necessary in the Spanish context. The second way to express a bodily pain is by using an indirect object pronoun. You may remember them, me, te, le, nos, or lace, followed by a conjugation of the verb doler. Don't confuse dolor, the noun, with doler, the verb. Follow that with a definite article and a body part or parts. And as you'll see in that last note, the body part and the article must always agree in number and gender. In this case, el, masculine singular, estómago, masculine singular. The le refers to her, since le is the third singular indirect object pronoun. She is a third person singular. In this case, object. And doler is always going to conjugate based on the body part or parts. So duele is singular since estómago is singular. If it was more than one body part, like my eyes, my legs, my arms, my head, and my knee, duelen would be required in that context. The body part or the body parts is or are the subjects in this case. Just to sort of follow up on a little bit about what we talked about here in the second expression, the object pronouns, we'll move on and discuss a little bit more about direct and indirect object pronouns. And as you can see on your chart or your slide here, you have two charts. Left side are your direct object pronouns. Remember, direct objects answer whom or what after a verb. Indirect objects answer to whom or for whom after a verb. So you'll see the difference in the definitions of each of these. If you notice, first person and second person direct and indirect object pronouns are the same. The context will give it away, whether you're referring to a direct or an indirect. And if you're looking to place them appropriately within a Spanish sentence, any one of these object pronouns can be attached to an infinitive verb. As you see in example A, leerlo, infinitive and pronoun attached to make one word. Or any object pronoun can precede a conjugated verb. So in the second example, B, the lo, the pronoun comes before the conjugation, which is in this case the preterite tense. I read it. It happened, past tense. And that lo in that second example can still refer back to the book. Masculine singular for libro. Our next slide is just a little bit of vocabulary that'll help you throughout this lesson, right, having to do with directions. Okay, good terms to be mindful of as you work towards this exam. Not a whole lot to say about them, just good terminology to use when giving directions and using commands together. As we move on, we're going to discuss the placement rules for descriptive adjectives, both inherent and non-inherent descriptive adjectives. Okay, an inherent adjective is one that is permanent or given. And these types precede the nouns they modify. They come before them. It's the less common of the two types or two rules. Here are some examples, right? The sky is typically referred to as blue in its most natural state. Okay, in this case, azul, the adjective, which is inherent, comes before the noun cielo. In another example, a high mountain. Mountains are generally high. If not, it would be a hill or something lesser. And alta is your inherent adjective, comes before the noun montaña. However, most times descriptive adjectives follow the nouns they modify, and these are represented by non-inherent qualities, those qualities that are not permanent or not given. And again, some examples. We use azul again, but not every book is blue. So in that case, it's not inherent. Books don't have to be blue, so the adjective should come after the noun it modifies. And not all men are tall. Again, the adjective comes after it, since in this case tall is not inherent. So think about the implication of the adjective. If it's given, if it's more of a permanent thing, then it's going to go before the noun it modifies. If it's not, and it's considered non-inherent, then it's going to go after the noun it modifies. As we move on to slide 17, we'll talk a little bit about possessive adjectives. And those are the ones that describe who possesses something, and they always precede the noun they modify. And in some cases, like first person plural, they also have to agree in number and gender, but in all cases, they have to agree in number. First singular, second singular, and both third persons don't have any gender in this context. Only first person plural, nuestro or nuestra, have that gender included as well. So you see a couple examples down below. If I have my book, libro is singular, so me, if it's mine, is singular. But once the number of books changes to a plural, libros, then mis has to precede it and agree with it. And since casa in the right example is singular, grande matches it as singular. All right, nuestra agrees with all of those things. Every word in that sentence is singular. Casa is feminine, nuestra is feminine. Casa is singular, feminine. Sorry, nuestra is also singular and feminine. But once the noun changes to a plural noun, hijas, daughters or children, then nuestras has to agree with that. And if you notice, even the adjective agrees as well. All the words are feminine and plural. Okay, so if you have a possessive adjective, place it directly before the noun it modifies. Make sure it agrees in number and or gender with that noun, as you see in those 4 examples on the bottom of the slide. As we move forward, we will talk about some ways to state what someone would like using the conditional tense. You have 2 options here, 2 phrases. Probably the more common of the 2 is me gustaría. I would like to. In this case, I would like to visit Puerto Rico. Okay, that may could change depending on the person. If she would like to, it would be le gustaría. If we would like to, it would be nos gustaría. But for the bottom option, quisiera is only used for first person singular. Just an additional way to express what I personally would like. So the top, you can use that for just about any person, changing the pronoun from me to any other indirect object pronoun. But the bottom option is strictly used for first person singular, yo, or in English, I. So 2 different ways to express what someone would like. And our last topic for today's webinar talks about formal commands and how to form them. A formal command is used to express someone you don't know or a group of people to do or not do something. Okay, and to form them, whether they are positive or negative, you're going to follow the 3 steps shown on the left. You're going to conjugate the verb to first person singular present tense, remove that O, which it'll end in, and then use either the third singular or the third plural ending seen in the chart on the top right to attach to what's left over after you've dropped the O. So to imagine the verb hablar, first singular present tense, step 1 would be hablo. You would drop that O, and to command someone formally, someone you don't know, you would take the opposite ending for an AR verb, which in this case from the chart is the letter E, hable. But if it was negative, it wouldn't change. It would just still be no hable. If you're talking to a group of people, however, which is the second example there, positive or negative would be hablen. And if it is negative, you just simply put the no before it. And then your second example, escribir, is an IR verb. Escribo would be first singular present tense. Step 1, drop the O. And since it's an IR verb, you would use the A or the AN ending. So that does conclude today's webinar. We do thank you for your time and your attention. If you have questions for us at any time as you're working on this or the remaining portions of your program, then please feel free to reach out to us during our normal business hours, all right, via phone, email, chat, text, or making an appointment with one of us. We would be happy to help you, and we wish you buena suerte, good luck in Spanish.